Now, the National Bureau of Statistics in its first quarter 2019 statistics revealed that between January and March of 2019, the Buhari administration spent a whopping 610.2 billion naira on debt servicing for domestic debts. Now, the amount is estimated to be more than the combined budget for education and youth development. This is for the whole of 2019. While the concerns of a recession may be over, there are new concerns about how debt could have been used as a means to end the recession. So should Nigerians be concerned about the amount used to service domestic and external debt? Well, tonight, Channels Television's data analyst, Babajide Ogunsowo, joins us to share insights from the research. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, Millicent.
All right. Now, while some are concerned the nation's rising debt profile is unsustainable, not sustainable, others believe that Nigeria is within a safe debt threshold. What do your facts reveal? Any red flags?
It depends on how you want to measure red flags, but I'd like to start from a slightly different perspective. You know what it said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be
Children
called
of God.
Blessed are the young Nigerian children, because they shall inherit the national debt. So today, the federal government owes how much, both domestic and external? The evidence shows that the debt of the federal government is 19.5 trillion naira. So here are three questions that Nigerians are concerned about that we need to provide answers to. The first is, how does the country make money? The second is, how does the federal government spend its money? And the third and final question is, why is the federal government borrowing so much? Those are the three questions we should answer tonight. The first question, how does the country make money? And the evidence shows that in the first 90 days of 2019, the first 90 days of this year, the country earned 2.3 trillion naira. But over 60% of this amount that the country earned 2.3 trillion naira, but over 60% of this amount came from oil revenue. The evidence shows that petroleum profit tax and royalties earn us more money than value-added tax, corporate income tax, and customs and excise duties combined. In other words, petroleum is still the main source of funding for the country. So that is how the country earns money. So clearly this shows that if there's a shock in the oil and gas sector, then the nation will be in trouble.
So when we talk about the federal government's spending money, is Nigeria's debt servicing a burden to perhaps alternative use of funds?
Let's look at this carefully. The question is, how does the federal government spend its money? And there are three ways that the federal government spends its money. The first is debt servicing. The second is money that goes to the ministries, departments, and agencies, the MDAs. And the third and final way that the federal government spends its money is by statutory transfers. Statutory transfers, the federal government can't really do anything about it. In other words, if we spend less money on servicing debts, there will be more money available to the ministries, departments, and agencies. If we spend more money servicing debts, then there will be less money available to the ministries, departments, and agencies, because statutory transfers are fixed. That's monies that goes to the National Judicial Council, INEC, the National Assembly, the National Human Rights Commission, Universal Basic Education Commission. Those monies are fixed. You know, again, I repeat myself, if monies that goes to debt servicing reduces, money that is available to ministries, departments, and agencies rise. That is the fact.
So how can they reduce the deficit? How can the federal government reduce the deficit?
Listen, speaking of deficits, we need to look at why is the federal government borrowing? That is what we need to look at. Why is the federal government borrowing? And the evidence, the real evidence that answers that question is found in not just looking at the monies that we are borrowing, but looking at how much we're earning, the revenues. And the evidence shows that the reason why the federal government is not borrowing is because revenue is not rising. So for instance, in 2018, the federal government earned a revenue of 4.1 trillion naira, but expenditure in last year was 7.5 3.5 trillion naira, giving a deficit of 3.3 trillion naira. How is the deficit financed? Through borrowing. Last year, the deficit of 3.3 trillion naira was the highest in our history. So if we look carefully at that table, we'll realize that revenue in the last 5 years has been stagnant, but expenditure has been increasing. And how do you finance expenditure when your revenue is stagnant? You need to borrow more. In other words, if you want to reduce your borrowing, you need to make more money. You need to increase your revenue.
So essentially you're saying it's good and it's bad. What does your crystal ball say about the future?
Even though no one can accurately predict the future, I'd like to tell you what I see from the former philosopher and economist Adam Smith. He says, what else will make a man, or how can you add to the happiness of a man who is in good health, who is out of debt, and has a clear conscience? So clearly, it is always good to be out of debt, but in Nigeria's case, our debt is sustainable, but we find red flags. What is the solution? The government needs to explore more of income from state-owned enterprises. Again, the government needs to explore more opportunities from state-owned enterprises.
We'd like to thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Again, no one
News at
can
10
clearly
tonight.
predict the future.
All right.